What's going on, guys? Today we're going to focus on the medical school interview and give you some simple ways to ace it. But the tips I'm going to describe can likely be applicable to any interview you're doing, whether that's for college or even a job. So with that, let's get started. This is the overall overview for the video today. As I said, we're going to focus on medical school interviews. But the tips I'm going to give you can apply to both in-person and virtual interviews, and hopefully can also apply to college interviews and things outside of that nature. With that being said, the overview that I want to start with is almost all medical schools will have some form of an interview, and there's different types. There is the traditional interview, and then there's also this thing called the MMI, which is the multiple mini interview. The traditional interview is kind of a sit-down format where you and I talk and have a conversation, and I get to know you. The MMI is more of a station-based interview, and you have multiple questions. I've created multiple videos in the past about the MMI, and I'm going to link both of them in the description below. But even in the MMI, there is a form of a traditional interview. And in that traditional interview, there are certain ways that you should prepare, because that traditional interview is the same across almost all fields, and the better you get at it, the more successful you'll be. I've also created a video in the past where I've went over big tips for succeeding in interviews, so I am going to link that video in the description below. As you can tell, I have a lot of resources, and I will always make those accessible for all of you, so just check that description. So with that being said, let me now talk about my personal experience for interviews. I don't think I am the best interviewer, and I think I've slowly gotten better over time. But even with that, I've learned that the interview can make or break your ultimate application. And the reason I say this is because the interview is often the last step before you get a job, or it's the last step before you get into medical school. And in both of those cases, when you get the interview, it implies that you're already good enough on paper, and now it's up to you to show up and show people why you're a badass. The problem why this can be tough is because everyone knows this. Everyone who's at an interview knows that they are all good enough, so some people just know how to present themselves better. And so for that reason, I think it's very important that you take the interview very, very seriously. For example, I actually didn't get into Harvard or Hopkins primarily because I think I had very bad interviews. And I can proudly and happily say I am maybe all the better for it because I did get into Yale, and the reason for that was because I had such a great interview, and to this day I know both of my interviewers very well, and I still love them very, very much. So just goes to show you that your interview is not just a foot in the door, but can also lead to lasting relationships. With that being said, the overview of the interview is already something I discussed with the personal experience, so now I'm going to go into the prep. The prep is all about things that you can do to get ready for your interview, and there's 5 things you can do to prep for your interview. The first thing is what I like to call the pregame, and what I mean by that is all of the things that you should pretty much already know, and this should be at the back of your mind because you should never be worrying about this stuff on the day of your interview. This is basic stuff like dressing well, making sure your tie is tied well, making sure your zippers are closed. For example, I have had an interview where my zipper was open, and that was just atrocious, and I feel like I should have known better. But these are all things that you take for granted, but you should take for granted because these are all things that you should not be worried about. The second thing is the outfit for an interview. You should always focus on being conservative just because you never know who's interviewing you. Some people may think it's important to be outlandish and express some personality in your interview. And while I respect that, you just don't want to take that big of a risk for this big of a case, right? You can maybe take that big of a risk once you get the job or once you get into med school. Then you can sort of slowly expand your boundaries and get to know the people you like. But at least for an interview, try to be a bit more conservative and formal. Black blazer, white formal shirt, black slacks. Try to keep it very traditional. Don't go all out. I think it's just there are more ways for that to go wrong than for it to go right. The other thing is make sure you have your basics down. When you're interviewing at a school, how many interviews are you going to have? How long? With what type of people? At least for medical school, when you get to the interview, they will tell you who your interviewers are. I strongly recommend you do your background research very subtly, whether that's on your phone or take a bathroom break and just look up the people interviewing you, because it's important to figure out what their background is, and at the very least, at least know a little bit about their field. For example, I had an interviewer who was an ENT doctor when I was interviewing medical school, and I had no idea what an ENT doctor was. And that's actually a huge red flag, because if you don't even know how to relate to the interviewer, they're not going to care much for you. And rest assured, they actually didn't care much for me, and I was rejected from that school. So It's just important to do your due diligence, look into the specialty of the doctor, look into their research, and find their uncommon commonalities. The last thing is be the expert on your application. If you're interviewing and and I bring up something on your application and you're like, I don't remember that, then that's already like a fail. Like I'm done reading, because at that point it's like, why did I take the time to read your application when you don't even know it, right? So that's the first thing. Make sure you have all of these pregame things down to a T. The second thing is prepare, but don't rehearse. What do I mean by that? You should always have a few anecdotes ready to go, stories that you love, stories that describe the person you are, but don't have them rehearsed, because the more rehearsed you look, the more you seem like a robot. The other thing is be ready for the give me questions. You will have questions like, tell me about yourself. Why medicine? Why are you a diverse applicant? What's your biggest challenge? Why do you want to come to our medical school? I also have a video for this one. I told you guys I got you when it comes to videos. This is the how to answer the tell me about yourself in interviews question. Check it out. It's going to be linked in the description below. But this is a question you will almost always be asked as the start to an interview. And it's important that you have a 2-minute spiel ready to go. And it's pretty damn good, because that's the way people will know you and be like, oh shit, you're cool, you know? So that's kind of how it's going to go. Prep number 3, play the game. Play the game. Interviews are a game. I like to think about them that way because it makes it a little bit easier for me to understand how they work. While they are a normal conversation, they're also, like, at the end of the day, a binary decision, right? Admit, don't admit. Give a job, don't give a job. And so in that regard, it is like a game, because you need to rack up enough points in the interviewer's head to make them say, like, I would take a risk on prereq, right? Like, this guy seems chill. From my vibes with him, I think he hit a few of the check boxes I like. So with all of that being said, the way you play the game is that passion and stories score you way more points than anything else. And the reason for that is, as human beings, we are attracted to enthusiasm. We are attracted, and we're more likely to be captivated when someone else is speaking with a level of vigor that we're like, oh, dude, that is different. If I just ask someone something interesting and they give me like a rehearsed answer, that's not as interesting as someone who like is passionate, right? Think about all the big speeches we've ever like seen or known to be famous. Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech, Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. All of these speeches are monumental, not because they had great content, but also because the people were speaking about things that they genuinely care about. And that is very, very important. So try to make sure you play the game. And anytime they ask you a question, see how you can connect it to your own passion. Whether that's entrepreneurship, running, whatever it is, if you can take a question and connect it to your passion and then talk about that passion, that's when you've hit the gold mine. Because that's when they'll be like, dude, this guy is something else, man. And so find your MO, find what you're passionate about, figure out what those are, and try to weave those into your interview, because that's when people will be like, that guy is something else. I really like him. Prep number 4. Never underestimate the value of humanism, specifically in medical school interviews, but even just more importantly and more broadly. If you are feeling like you connect with an interviewer and you think it's fit, don't feel afraid to open up a little bit and speak about what makes you vulnerable, what really either has affected you deeply, because that ultimately, it's weird to like have a 30-minute conversation and try to get to that level of intimacy with someone. But at the same time, those are often, I find in my experience, the interviews where I feel like I made a genuine connection with someone. And like where I'm like, even if this interview didn't go well, I like this person as a human being, and I want to stay in touch with this interviewer because I feel like they got to know me. They got to know me. And that's why one of the biggest tips I have to give to anyone in an interview is like, if you can get to a point where you are allowed to be fully yourself with someone and fully express like, this means a lot to me and I want to share this with you because I feel like we've reached that level. Even if you don't get the job or whatever it is, at least you can leave feeling like, oh, well, I exposed my true self to them. And for whatever reason, if that wasn't their vibe, that's fine. I'm okay with that. Like, it gives you a better bit of closure. But at the same time, if you do get the job after you show them that like level of humanism in you, you can feel all the more comfortable for it because you know that they accepted you for you. And like they accepted you with all your flaws and all your imperfections. And that makes that acceptance all the more valuable. So never underestimate that. Never like be afraid to make that leap. But make sure you're checking your boxes in terms of like, Are you getting the good vibe from that person? Are you feeling like they're empathic to what you're saying already before you make that plunge? Because sometimes they may not be on the same page as you, and that's when you don't want to make the plunge into going into something relatively intimate. But if you are feeling a certain level of connection with your interviewer, make sure you realize like we're all human here. And there's certain things to all humans that I think we are inherently able to relate to. And if you're on that wavelength, it's important to leverage it because I think that sets you apart. And last but not least, at the end of any interview, medical school, job, whatever it is, they will always ask you, what questions do you have? An interview, as much as it is a person interviewing you, it's also you interviewing that person and that job and that medical school. And so you need to have questions ready to go that allow you to like really see if this is the right place for you. For example, for me anyway, an important question to always ask is, how is the school addressing mental health concerns? It means a lot to me. It means a lot to who I am as a person, and I know I wouldn't be able to go to a school that doesn't have this as a priority. Does this school have AOA, which is an honor society? You can ask hard questions to your interviewer because the good part is if they don't have the answer, they will actually say, let me get back to you, and they can actually start a conversation after the fact. But you want to have hard questions ready to go. So I'm going to link 2 more hyperlinks in the description below. There's 35 questions I wish I had asked, not me specifically, some other person wrote this blog. And there's also a ways to brainstorm questions document that I'm going to link in the description below. And here are 3 questions from Norma Wagner. I don't know explicitly who she is, but I know she's conducted a lot of medical school interviews, and these are 3 questions that she recommends you can ask as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Peace.